Yeah.
All right, and then out of all the sites, we chose this site right here, and it's on a very steep hillside, so one of the issues we had to deal with was water runoff. And then we also went into researching different ecological issues, one of the first being deforestation.
Yeah, it's one of Rwanda's major ecological issues, if not the most important one. One of the most major causes of it is that wood is the nation's primary fuel source for the vast majority of the population. Almost 90% of the country's actually wood produced is burned as fuel. And this complete destruction of the forest causes just a multitude of problems. The main problem and most devastating is the complete destruction of the soil, because without the trees, the fertile land the country once had just starts crumbling, becomes devoid of nutrients because it doesn't have the roots there to kind of hold it together and allow the water to push through it. Just as a result, the farmland begins eroding away, eliminating just the source of the people's food in many instances, and effectively causing a food crisis over a period of time. The main solution to this problem is a process known as agroforestry, which is the interplanting of crops with trees native to the area. And this process helps the soil begin regaining its nutrients. In fact, it usually bolsters the nutrients, makes it even more nutrient rich. And this can lead to more plentiful harvests as well as higher quality food.
The next problem that deforestation can lead to is actual erosion of the soil. Tree roots are deep and complex and hold soil in place, and when you take that away, soil is left to just flow away, which it does. Rwanda has 2 major rainy seasons throughout the year where it rains almost constantly, and without any sort of root system to hold the soil in place, it leads to just landslides and actual destruction.
And the root system actually acts as a pathway system for the water to follow the tunnels made by the roots. However, if the roots aren't there, then it just has nowhere to follow and just pushes it all down the road.
And the next one is the one I focused on, was food security. Rwanda currently has one of the fastest growing populations in the world. In fact, its population is set to double by 2040. And on top of that, importing goods is expensive due to a lack of any sort of national transit system, whether it be highways or rail. There's nothing concrete set up. And this is sort of doubled over by the fact that it's also landlocked.
Just curious, is that growth in population because of birth or immigration?
I believe it's birth.
Okay.
Most of their population is...
The curve where it drops, that's when the genocide occurred, and then it picks up steeply.
So they have an incredibly high birth rate right now.
I think it's for every female births 4.5 children in the world. It's statistic.
Yeah, it's exploding.
This is actually the cause, in fact, of the genocide. Because in a 30-year time frame, you're looking at growing from 2.9 million to 6.9 million, almost 7 million people, and so that's actually as intensive, more intensive than the current kind of pace. Well, I guess not actually. If you look at post-95 pace, it's more.
Another issue is that most of the agriculture done in Rwanda is subsistence on a per family basis. And so that means every time they see, this is also added to the deforestation problem, because every time they see a tree, they chop it down and use it as farmland, which sort of just keeps cycling the problem back on over itself. So for our site, we decided to go with an idea of weaving green space and continuous green space. And this image here is from the actual Vision 2020 master plan, and they are 2 green areas set up that were sort of disconnected. And so our idea was to connect them.
So we did that by almost a direct connection, almost pulling the top part down to that and widening that skinny band at the bottom.
Does your site, can you go back to that slide?
Yeah.
Where's your site?
It is right.
Okay. So that connector is not entirely within your site?
Not entirely,
Okay.
no. So what we ended up working with and just how we got to this started with just a simple sort of forest buffer at the bottom of our site. And that was there sort of primarily act as an agroforestry zone, and also as like a rainwater buffer. So any runoff from the site could go through there before flowing down off of the site, which there are protected wetlands there, so you don't want that just flooding all the time. And then we ended up dividing it so it would sort of integrate into the city more rather than just be a wall. And then through several iterations, we ended up developing a giant green overpass, which was from a precedent study we did of a wildlife overpass competition that was held in Colorado. And then through that, we ended up also going with an underpass idea to get this weaving effect. And that's how we ended up here. And then the building we developed was an ecology center.
Yeah, we decided to kind of try to educate the people on the ecology of the country, sort of, because to us it seemed like they were almost
Blissfully ignorant of it.
Yeah. So what we decided to do was we looked at a map of Rwanda that had the 4 major national parks, which was Akagera, Virunga, the Volcanoes National Park, Lake Kivu, and then Nyungwe Forest National Park. We decided to kind of make that the focus of the ecology center with 4 terraces. Each one would be try to be an experiential, just exhibit representation of each park. And that leads us to our first one, which is...
So the first park we were working with is the Virunga area in Volcanoes National Park. This is located in northwestern Rwanda and actually shares a border with the Democratic Republic of Congo and is known for being a haven to mountain gorillas. And it's also where Diane Fossey did a lot of her work at. It currently has 8 volcanoes within its borders and is known for the famous Nyiragongo
Yep.
Volcano lava lake, and it's actually a huge tourist draw because it's just a bubbling pit of magma at the surface. It's an incredibly mountainous region and covered in a large variety of vegetation, including bamboo and lobelia.
So our idea for the exhibit was to have, it's the first tier, the highest of the 3, or of the 4, and we had a series of rocks spread throughout it that you could sit in, you could lean against, little kids can be like just stand on to look in. We also had a artificial lava lake which we thought could somehow give off heat, give off a sulfurous odor like the lava lake itself would, and just kind of try to give an experience of that area.
Next is Nyungwe National Park. It's one of the oldest forests in Central Africa. In fact, some of its trees date back to before the last ice age. It covers 970 square kilometers. That used to be a lot larger, although settlement and stuff has cut that down. Being a rainforest, it has a huge variety of plant life and animal life, including about 10% of all Africa's primate species live within this forest. So it is an incredible sort of biological jewel. And so what we did here to represent it is instead of actually just planting a forest on this terrace, we went with more of a representative form of a canopy made out of like wire mesh that would then have plants growing in it to give that filtered sunlight effect that a forest canopy provides. And that way, when you eventually go out into the site, you have a real forest waiting for you. And then next is Akagera National Park. It's a savanna, wetland sort of area. It's located in eastern Rwanda and borders Tanzania. It's one of the more older parks in the country, dating back to 1934. It contains some of the most diverse landscape. It goes from very flat to very hilly. And there were plans to reintroduce lions to the park as well as the black rhino, but if you kept up on the news recently, the black rhino is no longer among species of animals that exist. So that was sort of scrapped. Among common, I mean, we could clone it, but you know, can't really put a dead rhino in it. Common plants include the acacia tree, papyrus around the swamps, and several kinds of savanna grasses. Finally is Lake Kivu. It's a Rift Valley Lake, which makes it one of the deepest lakes. There are tectonic plates under it that are pulling apart, making it deeper with every passing year. It is one of the 3 lakes in the region that experience a phenomenon called limnic eruptions, which is basically there's all this volcanic activity going on, there's gas seeping into the lake, but because it's so deep, it dissolves into the water. So this lake actually has a huge amount of carbon dioxide and methane dissolved in it. And if there's any sort of eruption or earthquake that could actually disturb it enough to cause the lake to upturn and all this gas is suddenly undissolved and it can cause
So it's actually
tsunamis.
trapped
Yeah,
under the water.
it's a
right?
pocket.
It's actually a pocket?
Yeah.
Oh, I just read it as dissolved. So it's
It's
actually,
it's actually, the weight of the water keeps it down. But it's trapped below the water, so there's a huge pocket of air down there, or methane gas actually.
yeah, so it's one of the 3 exploding lakes. However, it's a thing, it's not. In fact, I think recently, in the 1980s, one of these actually exploded. Not at full scale, but. And there are currently plans to extract it, the methane, for energy use. And the thing the lake is most known for is several species of cichlids are endemic to the region just because they've been cut off from all others.
So it leads us to how, kind of like the building itself. First off, we have just a quick series of diagrams, how we got the form. We started with the first rectangular shape, trying to keep it in parallel with the line across the overpass. Then we combined that with another form, which was angled to give it more of a sight down that green weaving area that we designed into it. And we ended up stacking them and getting this, the form you have, see right there.
That way it's
Form-wise, the building, the idea behind it was to almost embed it into the overpass itself, which this diagram shows complete overpass, part of being cut and lifted almost, and then the building, a representation of the building protruding through it to give it the final idea that you can see in the massing model we have there.
part of the reason for this was that under the overpass, we have planned for a market space to be developed. And so that way you'd sort of open up the market to this green space and it just it's sort of a means of circulation and also just another way to experience it. And so we went with a completely open plan on the entry level, so you can go right from the market and all the way through. And then finally, just a little detail thing we had decided to keep.
Yeah, we, it's kind of hard to model it in a way. What we, kind of this experiential aspect of Cube that we hope to have would be almost like the lake cut in 2, that you can walk down and see like a trapped pocket of air itself under there would be separated by a pane of glass with the water on top on one side.
That's sort of like the representation, and also we would believe that it would be sort of pretty neat for a kid to go down there and just be, dwarfed by this little wall of water and then have, different information displayed about the lake, about the flora and fauna of the region. Sources.
That's the end of the presentation, but we'll talk a little more about the idea of the whole national park thing. There's these series of switchbacks, which, yes, we have the 4 smaller exhibits here, but that's kind of part of just a small part of the big picture we hope. These switchbacks would have paths branching off, which are drawn in on here, which would lead to each of the different, like a larger, more representatory,
Most
kind of like
realistic.
park area itself, pertaining to each of the national parks. With Kivu being here, Nyungwe here, Virunga here, and then Akagara here and here.
The reason for the placement, especially of Akagara, is at the edge of the sites, we have places for site runoff for where a storm sewer is essentially at flow. So it would sort of create a wetland sort of environment, and that sort of led itself naturally to Akagara. And here we also have, where their placement is, and then just a little more what they would actually look like, where these are just simple representations. So for Virunga, we went with a sort of weaving path among, mountain-esque things. Sorry. And in order to sort of make it more of a draw, there'd be benches built into the rock, there'd be a sort of rock climbing wall area, a larger version of that lava lake, as well as a representation of a fissure eruption, which also happens within the Varuna Mountains. For the New England area, we went with a sort of hiking loop and picnic area, as is common to many forests, and it would just sort of create a very pleasant atmosphere. Kivu is actually, being a rift lake, it's surrounded by a very steep coast. It doesn't have much pleasant shorelines like we're used to here. However, it seems like sort of a crime that we would put a big body of water and then make it inaccessible, so we sort of made it as a large sort of sporting lake that they could use. And then, as I just mentioned, Akagera would be this sort of spillover area, so during the rainy season you'd have this really neat dynamic wetland area, and then when it's the dry season, it would be sort of the savanna aspect.
Pertaining to the program of the building, what we kind of tried to do was take an idea of a science center, kind of like Carnegie Science Center or COSI, and kind of try to apply it to something that had to do with the ecology of the region, in this case, the national parks. On the top floor, we had mainly like an educational center with a cafe also, which would be accessible from the market as well as from the exhibit area. This would be a lecture hall here with just 2 classrooms where they could teach various,
Whether it be gardening classes or anything, or even just simply, here's why trees are good.
and then downstairs it would be a combination of more labs where ecologists could study different aspects of the area, like water.
Anything from water
Issues.
treatment, food science.
In this area, this open area, there would also be more interactive exhibits that people
Everything
could
from,
partake in.
we were thinking like nurseries and possibly a gift shop, because everyone loves a good gift shop.
The idea with the this open area, there's actually there's 2 completely enclosed areas here on either side with this open area coming from the market. The idea would be to kind of just have this view of the sun coming in through this area, have the people from the market drawing down here, and then they step out here and there's just this expanse of green, open, natural area to look down upon, explore.